Hello, everyone, and welcome to Latter-day Daily Digest. We try to honor creators on our show, and today we have John Hanson, who's the author of a book. And John, let's show your book real quick, and we'll also have it in the thumbnail at the beginning. Navigating on Black Ice, and there's probably a subtitle to it. It's My Mormon Life, right, with John Hanson. All right. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
And tell us about, give us a 5-minute sketch of your life that brought you to the point of your considering writing a book.
You bet. Well, the top of the book here shows my full name, John Moroni Hanson, which I never used Moroni. In fact, I did my best to hide it just an initial M my whole life. But I was named after my grandfather, who was a farmer in Carbon County, Utah, and died when I was about a year old. And so I never really knew him, but he drank coffee his whole life. And I drink coffee now, but I didn't for a lot of years. Well, my book is based on just my healing, I guess we'll call it, because we all have gone through trauma as ex-Mormons. We've gone through different degrees of trauma, and I was going through a lot of trauma, and I started writing down my reasons, because I was trying to understand how a seemingly intelligent man, as I saw myself, could possibly have been drawn into it. And then how did I even stay in when there were so many things that I was learning and that were on my shelf? And then, how did I ever get up the courage to leave it? And I had so much pressure on me. And so those three things were the basis of my writings. As I started to heal, I started to just write down in notebooks that I had all over my place. And I would just, when I would have a thought, I would go write it down. And so after about a year and a half of doing that, I was looking at my notes and gathered them all together. And I thought, you know what? This would make a good book. this would make a good book, and it might help someone else who's on their healing journey to read this book. And so that's when I got the idea of the book itself. And then the title for the book, I had a bit of a struggle with, because I was thinking originally of calling it something about the white oleander, which is the flower that's the beautiful flower that grows in dry gullies and ditches and things, and it just has a sweet aroma and is super attractive, but it's actually poisonous to man. And that was a title I was wanting to go with. And then as I was reviewing all my writings, I came up with the Navigating on Black Ice, My Mormon Life. And so I used to drive back and forth from the Seattle area, where I'm from, to Ricks College, now BYU, Idaho, and also back and forth to BYU in Provo. And so it was very common to deal with driving on black ice. And so it came into my mind, and the image that's on the cover of my book, shows the roadway with black ice, and it even looks like Utah or Idaho. And so I thought, well, that's a really, really good analogy or illustration of what Mormon life was like. It was like you could see this beautiful, firm black pavement underneath, not knowing that it's covered by really slippery ice.
So there are some hidden dangers in navigating things. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in actually Lacey, Washington, which is, there's 3 cities right together. Olympia, which is the capital of the state of Washington, and then Tumwater and Lacey. And I grew up in Lacey. When people ask, I just say Olympia, because nobody's heard of Lacey. And also Seattle is oftentimes what I'll just say is Seattle or Tacoma. Now I currently live in Tacoma.
Now, was Olympia where, like, was it Ham's Beer would do their advertising and talk about
Yes, the Olympia Brewery was, well, Olympia
Olympia
beer for a
Brewery?
long time was very popular. And
Oh, right, Olympia.
but my friends growing up, all drank Olympia beer and Rainier beer, and
Huh?
and, and I never drank. I never drank. I never had a taste for alcohol, of course, because I was Mormon and trying to do good. Now I did have some fun, as I mentioned in the book. I did a little bit of covert experimenting with some things, and alcohol, well, beer,
Like as a younger or older teen?
older teen.
Oh,
As a
okay.
younger teen, I never even thought about it.
And so you were like a deacon, teacher, and priest, and all those.
Yep.
You went to church all the time. Did you have leadership positions in any of those quorums?
As a kid,
Yeah,
yeah, I always did, because it just, the church was not very big, in the area, and so it was really hard to find even enough people to fill a quorum. I mean, a
right.
presidency of a quorum, but and we're buddies, and so it's kind of like, like today for Mormons today, there's really no inspiration, divine inspiration, I should say. So
Right,
it's a
just like
matter
more
of,
like a rotation.
yeah, pick your buddies. And so I used to get picked a lot, to be a whatever.
And then did you do early morning seminary?
My parents gave me that choice, so I didn't.
Okay. And then what made you go on a mission? What life events happened to decide to go on a mission?
Well, basketball was my life, up through high school and then going into college. I ended up going at the suggestion of one of my few LDS friends, and he turned out to be, my best friend for life. He's just an awesome guy, still is, still very active, and a great guy. And he encouraged me to check out Rick's college, and because I had a couple of scholarships, here in Washington State and up in the Seattle area, and I was thinking about doing that. And then I just got thinking about what my friend was talking about, and I thought, if there's any chance that I'm ever gonna be, LDS and active, I guess I really should be going to a church college and not to a party college, which most
That's
of
right.
them.
They were the Vikings, right?
Yes.
Did
Yes.
you try out for the basketball team there or
I did, and at the time of the tryouts, it was kind of an interesting thing, because I was doing, pretty well, and the coach had taken me aside and told me that I was pretty much on the team, but I needed to. I was really fighting for the scholarship position, which it was either number 7 or 8. There were 7 or 8 scholarships given, and he said I was right on the margin and fighting it out with another guy, and he wanted to see me pass the ball more. He said you rebound, you shoot, but you're kind of a ball hog. And I said, yeah, well. So I worked on that and was working on that. But the day after he told me that, I was stricken with my first episode of multiple sclerosis, as I know it now.
wow.
Back then, I had no idea what it was. Neither did the doctors, and so I was just, I lost all my equilibrium for an entire week. I couldn't even roll over in bed without vomiting. So I was trying to get better as fast as I could. And when I got better, I went to the coach, and the coach says, "You know what? It's been a month, and we've had to move on without you. So sorry." So that was the end of my basketball career.
So you lost your chance at the scholarship and even chance at making the team all at the same time.
That's correct.
What year about was that?
Well, that was 78. Oh, sorry. That was 76. And
Oh,
in
okay.
76, um, that was the year I graduated high school and started college at Rick's. And when I didn't make the team, I had people, Mormons, there telling me, this is God's way of redirecting your life. You need to go on a mission. And so that's when I started seriously thinking about going on a mission and looking at that. And it was sort of a change of identity for me, was exchanging the basketball player for the missionary.
So it was a sign from God.
Sign from God.
To be more religious instead of athletic.
Yeah, it was one of my questions that I had was, really, God's going to strike me down with multiple sclerosis so that I'll go on a mission? Didn't make sense.
Something to put on your shelf.
Yeah.
So do you remember the basketball players on the team?
I remember one named Randy Rhodes, and he was probably the star. He played the same position I played, and I played against him a lot. So I do remember him.
Do you remember a guy named Mark Gamblin, a tall guy?
Mark
he came from my ward.
Oh, he was a friend of mine, actually.
There you go.
He was a friend of mine, and I think we went on missions about the same time, I believe.
Okay.
Anyway, but I do remember him really well. He was a good player, and he was just a great guy. I used to hang out with him a lot.
We'll talk about him after the show more.
Yeah.
All right. So you decided to go on a mission, and where did you get to go?
I went to Guatemala City mission. There were only 2 missions in Guatemala at the time. There was the Quetzaltenango mission, which is called Xela. Also, the Indian name was Xela, Xela. And my mission was the Guatemala City mission, which was, the same mission that John Dehlin had gone on. And then also my son, one of my 2 sons, went on his mission to the same place.
Wow.
And in fact, had a companion from El Salvador on his mission, who was the son of a companion that I had on my mission from El Salvador.
Wow. There you go. Connections.
See, I mean, yes.
And so, how much of your book is about your mission experiences?
Well, mostly one chapter.
Okay.
So there's 30 chapters. The book is divided into 3 sections. The how I got in section of 10 chapters, the why I stayed in section of 10 chapters, and then the how I got out section of 10 chapters. And that was, intentionally done that way so that someone trying to navigate on the black ice could easily go to a section and read those. And so this particular mission chapter is chapter 19 of section 2, called Missionaries Gone Wild.
Oh, Missionaries Gone Wild. So we'll get to that in just one second. But first, I wanted to get back to, you said that you were journaling and writing things down, and you thought it started to shape up like a book. And did you do how to publish your own book or how to write your own book? Or did you have anybody that you contacted and discussed it, like a editor or a publisher or anything like that?
Well, I had written a book before.
Oh, okay.
It was on business, and so I was the manager of real estate offices for my 40-year career, and so I wrote this book about some of the lessons I learned in hiring the right people and motivating people in sales and things. And so that was an experience that kind of prepared me to do this, because
Sure.
Because I had done it once, and I thought, well, I could do it again. So yeah.
Okay, so you decided to write the book, and now we'll get back to Missionaries Gone Wild.
Yeah.
So what are some of the stories about that?
Well, there's a lot of them, and I put a couple in there, and embarrassingly, a couple about me. As a missionary, I was just devout, and I was gung ho, and I was going to go out into the wilderness and find a village and convert the whole village and things like that. And that was all
Just
in my
like the stories that we hear of missionaries when we're growing up, right?
yeah.
If somebody goes to England and converts a whole town or a congregation or something,
Yeah.
so you're going to do the same thing. And
Well,
it's interesting you say missionaries gone wild, because at the time you were in Guatemala, I think like I'm a year or so younger than you are, and I was maybe, we'll say, slow developing. But I didn't go on a mission because I thought you had to be perfect to go on a mission. And I knew that I was far from perfect. So it's almost like you're saying I could have fit right in.
yes, yes, most definitely. Yeah, and it was a shock to my system to go there and find out realities of how things really were. You know, I had a companion. My first companion was about to go home, and he asked me, says, "You want to dink around for a month or before I go, or do you want to work hard?" And I said, "I want to work hard." So we put in a hard working schedule of knocking on doors and that kind of thing, and did that for my first month, which was good. But I also observed both him, not so much him, but other missionaries who just were not really wanting to be there, and they were playing around and goofing around and stuff, and far from keeping missionary rules, right? And yet I was a stickler for them. And then when I was oh boy, when I was just like 2 months into the mission, I had been transferred out to this um, little town to open the church. It never had a member there, and so we were to create the church there. And
So you had this, your beginning missionary companion was like your trainer.
yeah,
And he was basically giving you the option to not be trained
right,
and to have fun, or to do it by the book. You
yeah,
picked to do it by the book. And then I guess you got transferred with a new companion into this new area now.
right, way out into the countryside. And we had zone leaders who were one of whom is sitting in the jail in Provo right now. We talked about that, and these zone leaders were a savior to me, because felt like I was losing my mind, and these guys were just earthy and happy and cheerful, and but my first chance I had to break a rule, I guess, was when we went to the new hotel they had just built in that little village, and they had a swimming pool on the roof, and we saw the swimming pool on the roof, and without even any hesitation, my companion and these zone leaders all jumped in the water and started swimming, and I just
That's
wouldn't
right.
do
Even though Satan has power over the water, right?
it.
Especially for
That's right.
missionaries.
Yeah, that's right. And I
But
just didn't do
I
it.
want to bring you back just one second and
Yeah,
touch on when you said you were like sort of losing your mind or whatever. What was causing that?
reality. So I had the fantasy that I thought I was
Oh,
going
okay.
to.
Because your experience was a lot different than what you thought it was going to be.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
I had high expectations. I know, and I wanted these things to happen. And
So since you didn't have 50 baptisms your first month, then reality was sinking in.
yeah, well, yeah, it was just this particular chapter kind of starts at the beginning and goes through some of the experiences I had, and this swimming pool one was I thought that was really a horrible sin, taboo, that these missionaries were jumping in, and I just wouldn't do it. But they just had so much fun, and they were playing this Jaws thing, so they would go, they were sneaking up on each other and go bump 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 bump, like the old Jaws
Mm-hmm.
thing. The shark was in the
I
water.
remember playing that in the pool.
Yeah, and so then for the rest of the mission, my mission, whenever we would see each other, nobody knew this secret, so people would, not people, these zone leaders or this old companion of mine would come up behind me and go bump, 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 bump. And that was kind of our code for,
we had fun one day.
Yeah, we had fun one day. Yeah. And so it was kind of weird. The missionaries, there was a particular group of just kind of fun missionaries and fun-loving missionaries, and they would also, when they would go shake your hand, they would slip one of the temple handshakes to you, and of course that would just crack me up. But then I'd feel disgust with myself. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that is like mocking,
sacrilegious.
Yes, and so it was horrible guilt from it. But that was, for them, it was fun, to sneak that little handshake to you. So anyway, so that was kind of my beginnings of it. And then as far as I as a missionary went, I really tried very hard to follow the rules my whole mission. I worked hard my whole mission. I attribute that to that first companion I had that gave me the choice. And then when I got toward the end, I guess I had so much building on my shelf and mounting on the shelf in the back of my mind that by the time I was almost done, I had like 3 months left in the mission. 4 months left in the mission. I guess I just gave up. I just gave up and really didn't have any more faith in God, let alone the church. And then it was just a real struggle. So I broke a lot of rules my last 4 months of my mission, and I kind of tell that story in the book, a little bit about some of the things we did. And when I say we, I was not a participant in most of the craziness, but I was an observer. I saw what was going on, what other missionaries were doing, which just, worked to break down my shelf even more.
Right. So you were, when you were breaking the rules, you weren't thinking you were sinning anymore? Or did you still think, well, I just can't be perfect, so I might as well sin. If you can't beat them, join them.
Well, I felt tremendous guilt.
So you're still guilty from it.
Yeah, and there was one incident where a group of us went to a discotheque, in Guatemala City, in the capital.
And John Travolta was big back then.
Yes, and we spent the night, just dancing, and then when the next Monday or Tuesday, I got called in to see the mission president. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And the mission president said, Elder Hanson, it's been brought to my attention that you and some other missionaries were at a disco on Friday night or whatever it was. And I just wanted to, he says, I was told that you were dancing with a barmaid all night. And I guess a barmaid, I didn't even know this at the time, but a barmaid was somebody who used to be hired to just go and entertain, at these places. And I didn't know that, but he said, but it occurred to me when he said it. He said, I was told you were dancing with a barmaid all night. And I said, well, he said, is that true? And I said, well, I had no idea she was a barmaid. I thought she was just a girl that liked me, that I was dancing with all night. But yeah, it's true. And he did not. I was expecting to get sent home from my mission.
I was dancing all night, but I didn't know what her occupation was.
Right. I thought she was just a girl that liked me. Anyway, so it's kind of funny to me that he didn't, send me home. And I thought, I wonder what it would take to get sent home, And so
did you want to start to push that boundary then?
Yeah, that was the height. That was really kind of the height of my rebelliousness at the end of my mission. And then when I got home, it was I was contrite and humble and trying to change and trying to be a Mormon, and that kind of thing.
You were repenting?
Yeah, repenting. And well, I confessed it, and I confessed it again to bishops over time. I seemed to confess it and other anything else I could find to confess all the time, because I just was engulfed in self-hatred, self-loathing, and instead of taking things in context a little bit and understanding how old I was, and what was going on around me, and those kind of things. So I've stayed in touch with only a couple of old missionary friends, and one of them who was, and all 34, all four of them that I have stayed in touch with. Three of those four were actually really good, hardworking missionaries. One of them was a total off the tracks missionary, but they are all active, have been active ever since their missions and their whole lives. And I am the only one of the five of us that has left the church.
Do you recall if most of those were like from Utah? Because there's a thing where they say like the Utah Mormons are different than the Mormons that are in the mission field, which is like everywhere that's not either Utah or Idaho.
Right.
And so they, in a way, know how to have fun and then repent, and then they're good, compared to people in the mission field who have to like be the example to everyone in their school, and there's more pressure put on those kids, that maybe it's harder when they sin or break the rules or whatever, compared to the Utah Mormons can just think, well, just like, Jay Golden Kimball, people would complain about him and he'd say, well, that's because I can repent faster than I can sin, or whatever he said. I can't remember. So that, it was just part of life,
Right. Well, none of them were from Utah, but of these ones I kept in touch with, but some of them were, yes, from Utah, and many of them were from Utah that were really rebellious. But when I was in college at Rick's College, that was when I and a group of others who had been, grown up outside of Utah and had been really good, trying to be good Mormons as kids and stuff, kind of rebelled for the first time. And we would go out and on Friday and Saturday nights and get some beer, and we'd drink some beer, and I didn't like it, but the taste of it, but it was fun.
Was this after or before your mission?
This was before my mission.
Right.
And so one of the guys who used to do that was a really good friend of mine and played basketball with me, and he ended up getting the mission call to the same mission, same time, same day. We were the only ones called to that mission in the whole MTC, and so we were, buddies in the MTC, trying to repent and be good, and we were doing well and everything else. But he was the first to crack on the mission. So when he was only a couple months into his mission, he just snapped and became, one of the rule breakers and rebellious guys. And then later, when we were both called to be zone leaders at the same time, pretty early in our missions, and we were both really tall, and so I think people noticed us a lot, especially in a country full of people whose height is much shorter than the height of your normal American that you would see on the street somewhere. And so we stood out, and he had snapped and was doing crazy stuff, and even as a zone leader, he was just off doing crazy things. And so my very first, I guess, test, if it's fair that I did or not, I don't know, but I just thought to myself, I've seen so many things within the church that show that there's no inspiration, and I want to see if this mission president actually receives any inspiration at all, because it was now time to call a new AP.
So you're going to do an experiment on the power of discernment.
Yes, and there were only 2 APs, and one of them was leaving the mission, and so a new AP was going to be called, And this missionary and I were the only ones that, had been zone leaders for so long, and in leadership in the mission. And I knew that I had been by the book obedient, and I knew that he was having a good time and just wreaking havoc in the mission, and he got the nod. So that was like a big shelf breaker to me, was because I was testing it to see if this mission president had any inspiration at all, and he went on to to be the creator of much havoc in the mission, because he now was an AP, so he could drive around the mission and visit missionary friends
and stir up trouble
and have fun with them. So it was anyway. So that was my personal test to God to see if really there was any inspiration.
Right.
Clearly
it just
not.
didn't happen. So let's go back actually just before your mission. I remember one thing in history. Were you at Rick's when the big flood happened?
Well, I arrived there in August of '76, so it was like just a few months after.
So it had already occurred when you got there. Okay.
All my records that I sent from my basketball coach from high school had been washed away in the flood. So the coach
Wow.
was always expecting the coach to welcome me and start worshiping me, and we'd have him say, everything was lost in the flood. We have no idea who anybody is coming in.
Wow. Was that his personal home was close to where the flood was, or college records were stored?
Those are college. Yeah, those are at the college.
Wow. I didn't know it had come that close to the college.
Yeah.
I just thought it was homes endangered. Okay. So back now to your story. So after your mission, did you then go to BYU, Idaho again? Or, Rick's College again?
I graduated from Rick.
You had already graduated?
Yeah. Before my mission. So after my mission, I went to BYU.
Right, because Rick's being a 2-year college, I guess you got an associate's degree or in general ed, or how'd you do it?
Associates.
Yeah. So you transferred to BYU. So now you're trying to repent from your mission.
Right.
You're going to another church college. So if you're going to want to have a dating life, you're probably going to want to behave and present yourself as celestial material. Is that what happened?
Well, yeah, that's what I did. And then, and the cognitive dissonance was deep, and I was really struggling a lot because I had so many doubts, questions, anxieties about the whole Mormon experience. But yet I'm in a reality at BYU, seeing, like you said, that I have to be this upstanding Mormon to get dates and things like that. And so
you almost had to have like a split personality.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. And I was working at when I first got off my mission, I was working at Sears in Provo. I don't know, is Sears still functioning as a store? I don't know. But Sears Roebuck and Company was where I worked in Provo, and then I met a girl there who was Mormon, but not. and so
sort of in the same area of you, in the same part of the Mormon spectrum. She was sort of like attending.
Yes.
But you didn't maybe fully believe.
Right. But she wanted it all to be true, just like me. So we were very much
true,
which was probably part of the attraction.
And was the plans still to get married in the temple then?
Yes. I was realizing I needed to. It was me that was causing all the problems. I needed to get back on track. I needed to, focus again. But then I met her, and we, and I didn't have much money, so I couldn't really take her out on dates. Plus, she had young girl. She was a couple of years older than me, and she had been married, and she had a couple little girls, 3 little girls.
Oh, so she had a prior relationship that went bad.
Marriage, yeah.
Yeah, marriage.
Yep.
And
He was
so
not home.
she was trying to restore her position in the church in a way, even though.
Right.
Okay.
So a date was just me going over to her house and
Right, and
watching
babysitting.
watching TV and babysitting, and then when the
Uh-huh.
kids would go to sleep, we would smooch and that kind of thing. And then one night it led to sex, and I was racked with guilt. And the next day I went into my branch president and confessed, or bishop, I guess they call it a bishop, BYU.
Right.
I went into my bishop and confessed, and then I was disfellowshipped from the church. And then when I was not allowed to go to attend classes for a year at BYU, except for night classes,
Right.
you can enroll, So
Did you stay in Provo area?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I stayed in Provo, and I was still
Just
working.
worked.
And I told when I did tell my dad, who was pretty loud and aggressive, I was fearful for me to tell him what had happened. But when I told him, he just was furious and livid at the church and at the bishop who had done that. And he said, "You went in and you confessed. And according to the gospel I'm familiar with,
You're supposed to be forgiven after
yeah,
confession."
you're supposed to be forgiven." He said, "That's not what was done here." And he says, "And that's just wrong." He said, "You are such a good kid trying to do things right and all this stuff." And so he was just really mad at the church, but mostly at that particular bishop.
Now, when you had sex, had you talked about getting married with this woman?
No.
Okay. Because I remember reading, Spencer W. Kimball's Miracle of Forgiveness, that if you were betrothed and if you kind of happened to have sex just before you got married, that would be okay because you were close enough. That's what I remember from the book.
Well, I thought through the escape clause and things like that, And so, yeah, I thought through things like that, but I was just, I was young and naive and just human, I guess, And
So you write it out for a year. Were you still dating this person, or did you move on?
Well, I still dated her, but but we didn't, engage in sexual activity.
Because you were ashamed now.
And I was trying to repent and all that stuff. And then, and I remember she took me out to see a friend of hers in a neighboring town. Like, I don't know, I can't even remember the names of the towns around there. Anyway, some little town south of Provo. And
Springvale. Yeah, Springvale.
To visit this friend of hers who had married a returned missionary under the circumstances you just described that Spencer Kimball was saying, that she'd had sex and you get married, I'll be washed under the table or whatever, and under the bridge. And so I felt trapped. So when she took me, I felt like I was being ambushed and trapped into marriage. It wasn't in the cards, at that time. So.
Oh, so you know what? If you said you married that girl, I would have said, "Oh, so the Lord actually wanted you to have sex with that other person so that you'd eventually meet this other girl and marry the right person." That would have been like the same trajectory as you having, your experience in college of having multiple sclerosis, where God sort of punishes you in a way to get you on the right track.
There you go. God.
So how long did it take then for you to give some woman her MRS degree?
Yes. Yes, God can be quite the puppet master, which is one of my chapters in my book. Is called the puppet master. So I know there's a lot of Mormons that didn't think or don't think the way I did, but I saw God as a puppet master, who would pull strings to do things like you're talking about, like give John MS so that he'll go on a mission and all that kind of stuff. Anyway.
And if you think about it, that's way nicer than sending an angel with a flaming sword to try to get you to do the right thing.
Yes. Just simply curse him when he does bad and then bless him when he does good. It's how I saw life back in the day. So, but I did then, while I was disfellowshipped, I ran into an old girlfriend that I had as a girlfriend at Rick's College, who had also served a mission. And we got married. And of course, that was my way of atoning for my sins, was to marry this returned missionary, and TBM to the day today, as TBM, even though we've been divorced for over 20 years. When I realized I just had married for the church, and that's who I really married, was the church.
Right. Because it said in your patriarchal blessing that you would go on a mission and then you get married in the temple.
Yes.
And so you were following the plan.
That's what the fortune cookie said. Yes.
Now, did you tell her then before you got married about your past sins then?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so she just felt you were repentant. Yes. And that in a way, she almost could be feeling that she was going to be your savior. She was going to help you get back on the right track.
Maybe, but I sure felt that way. I felt like she was what I needed to slap me in the face and get me going on the right track,
Right. And how long were you married then? 20 years?
Yeah, we were married 21.
21 years. And how many children?
4.
4 children.
Yeah. Only one of them is active in the church, and he's the one that lives in Guatemala.
Okay.
Where I spend,
So I assume how many chapters in your book are of your 21 years being married? Ish. I mean, you can come close.
Well, I've got a couple of chapters that are in the middle section, of the 3 sections. They're in the why I stayed in. That's mainly why I stayed in.
Yeah. So you're temple married, and what kind of callings did you have?
I used to be. My favorite calling was to work with the 14-year-olds, and so I was either the
Sunday school teacher or the teacher's quorum advisor.
Yes, and Sunday school was my favorite thing with them, and so some of my memories with them were when they would ask me great questions that I'd wondered myself, and I didn't have answers for them. I didn't know. I'd say, well, pray about it. Go pray about it, and read the Book of Mormon again. Anyway, so these were things that went on, and I still was living in cognitive dissonance, but wanting. The whole time I was wanting so bad for the church to be true.
Right. So, and back to the teaching. Did you sort of feel like you were mentoring them to prepare for missions?
Yes.
Did you invite them to teach a lesson every now and then themselves to get them teaching experience?
No.
Okay. I did that. So I had the same calling, Sunday school for 14-year-olds.
Oh.
And I did that. I mean, on one hand, because I didn't like giving lessons, maybe. We had 4 kids, and, if I gave them 1 lesson a month, then I only had to give the 5th Sunday lesson. But actually, I did most of the lessons. I would just do it like every 2 or 3 months. I'd let them, because one thing is there was some misbehavior in class, and I figured if they each gave lessons, they would then be more respectful to each other which would train them to be more respectful for me. And I don't remember if it worked or not.
Good idea. Yeah, and by the time I was 30, I was in the elders quorum presidency, and went from there to the bishopric, and then from the bishopric, 5 years, I guess I was in the bishopric, and that bishop just died, just very recent, like a
Wow.
year or two ago, and he was a wonderful, great person, not just bishop, but a wonderful, great person. So that was really sad to see that he passed away, and very suddenly. And no, I don't even know what the causes were, because I don't have any connection with Mormons anymore. So I don't really.
Right. So had you moved away from Utah after you got married?
Yes, and back to the Olympia area.
Back to the
Washington.
hometown area.
Yeah.
Hometown boy, makes good, comes back, married, starts having kids, growing the church,
Well, since you put it
doing all the things.
Yes, that's correct, Gene, very much so.
Develops his real estate career. He's a real estate professional.
Yep.
What do you call it? Not bastion, but a pillar of the community.
Yeah.
Were you like in the Chamber of Commerce and things like that? And
yeah.
When you were in the Chamber of Commerce and you guys did a good thing, did it seem like the Chamber of Commerce was doing more good things for the community than the ward was sometimes?
Well, we actually did a lot of good stuff in our ward.
Okay.
At least when I was in bishopric, and I just remember, spending 2 or 3 nights and all day Saturday and Sunday, doing church stuff, and
Right.
I was all in, I was all in, and I have a chapter called Playing House in my second section, and so Playing House was when I realized, that I was, caught up in this, and it was just what made things, what made me tick, I guess, was being in the church and serving in the church. And I was so involved, I didn't even think about what was going on. And blind obedience, is another chapter in that section. And so I was just.
So when you call it playing house, are you almost saying that you're living in a different reality?
Very much so. Yeah.
So like there's everything around you when I think about playing house in, kindergarten or whatever. There's a fake kitchen. There's people are interacting. You're either, making something or putting dishes away or washing the dishes or using the vacuum, the toy vacuum, and you're going through all the motions, but nothing real is actually happening.
Right. And so when I say playing house, it was part of that was not really knowing what love was. So I'm married to this woman all these years, and I didn't even know what love was, And in fact, I'm only just now discovering, what love really is, and what unconditional love is. And I live with a lady now, and I've been with her for 3 years, and she just loves me unconditionally. I just don't know how she does it, But
I was reading somewhere that, that you could tell you're in a loving relationship if you feel safe, if you feel like you can share anything and you would still feel safe and loved. And that would be like a true loving relationship.
Sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right.
I'm sure, we say unconditional, but I'm sure if you started killing people or robbing banks, you wouldn't be as loved.
Right.
Like within a reasonable level of existence, right?
Yeah. And that's interesting you say that, because toward the end of my 21-year marriage, I had gone out for an early morning motorcycle ride. And I didn't know that I was diabetic at the time, but I was. I just didn't know it. So I'm riding on my motorcycle out in the countryside, and all of a sudden I felt like I was going to pass out. And I pulled off to the side of the road, and I got off my bike, took off my helmet, and I was trying to breathe and understand what was going on. Well, I know now that my blood sugar had just bottomed out. And I needed something to get my blood sugar back up. And I looked up and down the road, and I saw nothing except for one little coffee stand. So here in the Northwest, they have little coffee stands all over the place, and so I walked over to this coffee stand, and there was just a young kid there, and I said, do you have water or soda pop or anything? And he said, no, just coffee. And I said, oh. And he says, you don't like coffee? And I said, no, I don't drink coffee, and I don't like coffee. And he said, well, he says, do you like chocolate? And I said, well, I love chocolate. And he goes, well, let me make you something called a mocha.
Mm-hmm.
And so he made me a mocha. And I said, does this have coffee in it? And he says, yeah, but you'll just taste the chocolate and it'll be really good. You'll like it. And it'll help you.
But you're thinking, oh, I'm going to sin if I have this.
Well, I was mostly focused on survival, because when you
Right.
are, when your
The
blood sugar
ox.
goes like that, I just was like, I could feel a panic, so I drank this mocha, and oh my God.
Because the ox was in the mire, so it was okay to do it. And you
Yeah.
loved it.
And when I got home, so I got up enough energy to get my helmet on and get home, and I got home, and I came in and sat on the couch and was just trying to breathe and figure out what happened. And my wife came in, and she asked me what happened. I told her, and she was livid. She was livid that I had drank coffee. And I says, so you don't care that
You're still alive.
I could have fallen over and died, or I could have gone in the ditch and died, or run into a car and died. You're concerned about the image, right? The image of a husband who now is going to be released, as she told me, you're going to be released from your calling now. You're going to be because I was the ward mission leader at the time. She goes, you're going to be released from your calling. You're going to have this, and you can't go to the temple and all these. And I just thought, she cares about her image, and she doesn't care about me, and that tells me something.
Right.
And so that was I guess kind of the beginning of the end, because from then on, everything, the way the mind works, everything was trying to justify or measure those thoughts, that she really doesn't love me. And so all of a sudden, it was like she could do no right, because everything was proof that she didn't really love me.
You were looking for more reasons in a way.
Yeah.
Did you feel that like she was in like a different church than you were in? Did you think of it that way?
Well, sometimes.
Or that she thought of Jesus a different way than you did?
I definitely thought that, because I was like my dad, I guess. I thought Jesus was supposed to
Loving.
atone for our sins, and
right.
And in her world, I think it was more of, well, Jesus has already atoned for your sins, and so anything you do is just adding pain to his suffering. Or
there's those lessons too, like driving another nail into his arm, wrist.
So and that's my opinion. So this whole book, is really just my opinions, just my
perspective.
It's my story. It's the way I saw things. It's the way things rolled out for me. I think a lot of ex-Mormons and people who are on the fringe, can relate to a lot of the things that I experienced and share in this book, and I already had a couple come back and tell me that how much it's helped them, to realize, what was happening to them in their lives.
So I know that you've been on some other podcasts, right? Or other places you've shared the story. You were with Bill Reel.
Yes.
I think. Did you do any other shows?
Just Bill and you.
We'll provide a link Have you shared anything with me that you didn't with Bill, other than the one elder that is now in jail?
Yeah, I didn't share that with him because it hadn't happened yet. But
Right. And so even though we're not going to mention his name, I'm going to put a link to the maybe the newspaper article, because on one hand, things still have to happen maybe, or, I don't know, has it been through the court system yet?
I don't think so.
Yeah. And so we don't want to, mess with that. On the other hand, people need to be aware that there are dangers all around, and you can't just assume if somebody's a church leader or something like that, or they've gone on a mission or something, that they are automatically safe for your friends and family or children to be around.
Right,
And so
because he was a bishop and he was a counselor in the stake presidency. Yes.
And he's accused of sexual abuse.
Correct, with patience, with his patience.
With patience. So anyhow, we'll also provide a link to like I say, the Bill Reel episode. Want everybody to, look. We'll provide a link to the Amazon where your book is available for purchase. Are there any other things you wanted to share that would either encourage people to buy the book, or is part of the end chapters you say are like how to live afterwards, and so there's hopefulness and optimism?
Yeah, the last 3 chapters are about post-Mormon life and how to live.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, John.
Yeah.
It's been great talking with you. I mean, we need to talk more about other things, because there are a lot of parallels in a way in my life. I didn't serve a mission, like I mentioned, but there are other things where, basketball was my life, and other things like that. So anyhow, thanks everyone for watching. Like and subscribe. And if you know anybody that could benefit from, watching this, share the video, let people know about the book, and everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.